Hi. So we left off yesterday, we were talking about growth rate, which is, I think we got all this, but just in case, the amount by which a population's size changes in a given amount of time. So the growth rate, kind of like how your growth rate is how tall you get over 18 years. In this case, it's how big a population gets over however many years. And there we talked about that there were three factors that can greatly increase or decrease the size of a population. And these are pretty logical. The first one is the number of births, the number of deaths, and then also the number of people coming and going that enter and leave. Makes sense. I use the example of Tracy. Since I lived here, the population hasn't changed a lot, but it's gone up and down a little bit, and that's because some years there's more people being born than dying. Some years there's more people dying than being born, and then we also some years have a lot of people leaving. And then we've also had times where we have a lot of people moving back or moving to our area. And so this is all going to change the population, and this can happen with animals too. Sometimes they're coming and going. Sometimes there's a lot of them being born, and sometimes there's a lot of them dying. So it makes sense. So this is also pretty logical, but don't space it off just because as I say it, it makes sense. It still has to be something that you can identify on a test and that makes sense even without my prompting. So if more individuals are being born than die, what's going to happen? The population is going to increase. If the birth rate, in other words, how many individuals are being born, is equal to the death rate, what do you think is going to happen to a population? Well, it's going to remain stable. And then obviously, if the death rate is higher than the birth rate, so you've got more people dying than you do being born, the population is going to decline. So these are very logical, be able to identify them. Okay, so migration is describing organisms coming and going. It's kind of the base word, though, for a couple of different ways that we describe migration. Because migration itself is simply the movement of individuals into and out of a population. So we always think of migration as just moving from one locale in the winter to another locale in the summer. And our north would be summer, right? But we can actually divide it up a little bit and be more specific. So specifically, one of the words is immigration. And we think of immigration, immigrants moving from other countries to the United States. We call them immigrants. Well, we use this word to describe animal populations also. And this is the movement of individuals into an area. And then we can also be more specific in emigration. This one might be a new word for you. The movement of individuals out of an area. And how I remember that, or maybe a way that you can remember that, is I in immigration can also be for in. And E for emigration can also be exit. So immigration, they're coming into an area, and emigration, they're exiting or leaving an area. And obviously, if people are coming and going, that's going to affect the population. So immigration would increase the population. So what do you think emigration would do? Decrease. So we're going to, immigration increases, emigration decreases. Hint, that would be a really good question on a test. Which one increases a population? Which one decreases a population? So two processes increase the size of populations. Can you remember what they were? Because this is a review. This is kind of bringing it all together. So out of what we've talked about so far, what would be two processes that increase the size of a population? We just talked about one. One would be immigration. How about birth rate? So birth rate and immigration are going to increase the population. Now it probably is pretty easy to figure out which two processes are going to decrease a population. Death rate and emigration. That's right. So when we're studying population density, some of the questions that we feel we need to answer are, why is the birth rate unusually high or unusually low? So if we see a population just exploding, lots of babies being born, why is this happening? Not necessarily because it's a bad thing or because it's an awesome thing. It's very specific to that population. For some organisms, that would be great. And for other organisms, that would be terrible. If we saw the elephant population, if we saw their birth rate increasing, we'd probably think this was a pretty good thing. Since the elephant population over the last century has taken quite a hit due to elephant tusks being so valuable. They're hunted for their tusks. But if we looked at the human population, an increase in birth rate would be terrible. We don't want to see an increase in birth rate in the human population because we are already growing out of control. We need to level off. So it isn't necessarily always a good thing or a bad thing. But it is something that we always want to ask. If it's changing, why is it changing? And then another thing that we want to ask is, why are more individuals dying than normal? Just the opposite, right? So this one probably tends to be, in general, a bad thing. We don't want lots of individuals dying off. A while back we saw that there were a lot of fish dying in certain river populations, and we found out that it was very much linked to pesticides and herbicides that were being used in fields. And now, we've learned ways to control that. I think we can still learn more, but so we take a look at, why are individuals dying more than normal? And then another question is there a reason for unusually high immigration or emigration? Are they all trying to get away from something? Or are they all in search of something? So we want to figure out why populations are doing these things, or why this is happening in a population. Now, exponential growth, I don't know if you remember from math what exponents are, but exponents are, if you were to take 2 times 2, that would equal 4, right? Multiplication, we get big numbers pretty quickly. But with exponents, if we had like 10 to the 10th, that's a much, much, much bigger number than 10 times 10. It increases very, 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 very fast. And we call those exponents. Well, exponential growth is a reflection of that. It's growing really, 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 really fast. So under what conditions would rapid growth occur in a population? So we want to know, why is this rapid growth happening? It might be that there would have to be plenty of space and an abundance of food. Now, if we look at the human population, we have been growing exponentially for a really long time. And we're going to go into more of that again later. We kind of keep coming back around to that. But we have space still. I mean, there are some countries, you go to Japan and China, there's not near as much space. Once I was on a camping trip in North Dakota, and maybe I've told you this, but I think it's a classic example. We were on our way back from the West Coast. We thought the West Coast was really cool, and that was where you'd want to visit. And we were camping next to this English couple, and they were so excited. They were going to spend 2 weeks in North Dakota. And my friend and I looked at them like, are you crazy? There is nothing in North Dakota. It's just flat and empty. Out of all of the places that you could visit in the United States, we have deserts and mountains and big cities and forests and all of these beautiful places, and you want to go to North Dakota? And what their answer was that over where they live, there isn't such thing as wide open spaces anymore. Everything is being filled in. There's houses everywhere. And they thought it was pretty cool to go somewhere where there were wide open spaces. So I thought that was kind of an interesting idea. I don't think of that as a benefit, I guess, until I had heard it from them. And so even though in some places we're really tightening spaces as humans, we still have a lot of space. And we have an abundance of food. We're making our own foods. Can't say all the food that we eat is healthy, but it's there. And it's helping us grow and get on with our lives every day. So we have space and we have an abundance of food. You would want a situation, if you want exponential growth, there would have to be no predators or disease. And we really don't have any predators. Now, yes, occasionally you hear of someone in Alaska getting eaten by a bear, or swimming in the ocean, someone gets eaten by a shark, I guess. But this is not the norm. There isn't an animal out there that on a daily basis hunts humans. So we really don't have predators. And yes, we have disease, but we're a unique organism in that we can prevent diseases. We have medicine for diseases, and we have all these ways to work around the whole idea of disease. So I think that this idea that we have no predators or disease fits us more so than other organisms, which is another reason that we have exponential growth. Another place that we saw the exponential growth is with those lady Asian beetles. They went nuts. They had lots of space. They had lots of aphids that they could feed on. And here they didn't have any natural predators because the birds didn't like the stink that they gave off. So they didn't, they were exponentially growing when they were first introduced here. And that happens a lot with introduced or invasive species, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later also. So if all factors for reproduction and growth are ideal, so if we've got lots of space, lots of food, no predators, no disease, the population would grow exponentially.